On a late night, just past midnight, on October 16th, 2010, in the city of Mopo, located in Jeollanam-do, a woman known as Miss A was slowly driving around in her car. Her face was etched with anxiety. Just a short while before, at 11:20 p.m., her younger sister, Miss Jo, had sent a text message saying she was coming home. However, she had not yet arrived, and Miss A was out searching for her. Her sister had left a message saying, "I finished my shift and am now walking home through the park." Given the distance, she should have been home by now. But after this message, all contact with her sister was lost, prompting her elder sister to drive around the area herself. At that time, Miss Jo, who was 22 years old, was in her fourth year at a certain nursing college. Her plan was to work at a university hospital in Seoul after graduation. In about 80 days, she would fulfill her dream of becoming a white angel, as nurses are often referred to in Korea, once she passed the national nursing examination. In truth, Miss Jo had quit her part-time job at a fast food restaurant to focus on preparing for this exam. However, she was called in that day as a replacement, so she went to work. Reviewing the events of that day, at 11:11 p.m., Miss Jo left her job at a fast food restaurant located in Sangdong, Mopo City, and was heading home. The buses had stopped running, so unlike usual, she decided to walk home. The distance to her house was 1.5 kilometers, which would take about 30 minutes on foot. Remember, she sent the text message at 11:20 p.m. Therefore, no matter how late, she should have been home by midnight. Ultimately, her family, worried and desperate, reported her as missing to the police. Since there was a message saying she was on her way home, this could not be dismissed as a simple runaway case. Moreover, Jo disappeared late at night. The police immediately suspected that she had become involved in a crime and began their search. As the search continued, at 4:30 in the morning, something was discovered near the path she usually took to her home. It was Jo's coat, found lying on the ground. Not long after, her body was discovered in a drainage ditch behind a sports park located in Sangdong, Mopo City. It was Jo, whom her family had desperately been searching for. This drainage ditch was a mere 20 meters away from the walking path she took on her way home. Her body was found in a crouched, face-down position, completely unclothed, yet there were no signs of non-consensual intercourse. Instead, there were bloodstains around her mouth and dark bruises, especially around her eyes. This indicated that she had been severely beaten by someone. Additionally, there were noticeable wounds on her head, suggesting she had been struck by something. Initially, the police presumed that the cause of death was cranial trauma, meaning she died from injuries to her head. However, the results of the autopsy conducted by the National Forensic Service revealed a different conclusion. Her definitive cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation due to neck compression. In other words, the victim, Jo, had been physically assaulted up until the moments before her death and ultimately died from strangulation. Notably, there were fractures observed in her hyoid bone, a bone located deep within the neck. This bone is known for its strong elasticity and is generally difficult to break. This implies that the perpetrator had strangled her with great force. On the third day following the incident, a worker collecting trash near the coastal area of Mokpo's Gatbawi stumbled upon a bag presumed to belong to a woman. The bag was thoroughly soaked in seawater. Upon inspection, it was identified as the personal belongings of the victim, Miss Jo. Inside the bag were her identification card, a mobile phone with the battery removed, glasses, and a wallet. Also found were the stockings and underwear she was wearing at the time of the incident. Notably, the cash in her wallet was missing. However, Miss Jo's shoes were not discovered. The police immediately checked the tidal forecast for the Mokpo area, specifically the times of high and low tide. They calculated the time when the sea would rise and recede. From this, it was deduced that the perpetrator likely discarded the victim's belongings at this location before 3 o'clock in the morning on the 16th. If the perpetrator disposed of the items here, it was hoped that fingerprints, or some identifiable marks, might be found on them. However, the seawater had submerged the items for quite a while, and they were completely soaked, making it impossible to retrieve any clues. Thus, presently, the only substantial lead in tracing the perpetrator is Miss Jo's body itself. At this point, a glimmer of hope emerged. Under Miss Jo's right fingernail, DNA from an unidentified male was discovered. Furthermore, the same DNA was found as saliva on her chest. This suggests that the perpetrator attempted to assault her, and during her fierce resistance, the DNA was transferred. The police immediately collected DNA samples from individuals in Miss Jo's social circle. Given that the locations of the crime scene, the discovery of the body, and where her belongings were found are all different, DNA samples from residents living in the vicinity were also secured. In the course of the investigation, there was considerable backlash from the public, with many questioning whether this approach was an infringement on human rights. Despite the harsh criticism, the police proceeded with their efforts, which ultimately led to a dead end. There was no DNA match among the individuals in the vicinity. The authorities also tested individuals with similar prior convictions and those with histories of sensitive or inappropriate behavior, but these efforts yielded no results either. At that time, it is reported that the police collected DNA samples from approximately 1,100 individuals. Furthermore, over 2,000 people were questioned as part of this extensive investigation. It was a remarkably proactive search. Nevertheless, no answers emerged. Meanwhile, the path leading through the sports park in the Sangdong area of Mopo City, where Jo was returning home, was under development that year as a walking trail. Consequently, closed-circuit television cameras were not densely installed. The existing surveillance footage did capture Jo, but it only showed her walking home. There was no suspicious individual before or after her in the footage, nor was anyone following her. In a desperate attempt to find leads, the police sought out witnesses. Subsequently, they received a report about a suspicious man spotted at around 10:20 in the evening on the night of the incident. At this time, victim Jo had not yet left work. However, a report was filed about a suspicious male seen loitering around the park. This man appeared to be in his early to mid-20s and was observed wandering around the area aimlessly. It is important to note that this was a sports park. It is reported that he was not exercising, but rather glancing around as if waiting for someone, which was considered quite strange. At that time, the individual was described as a somewhat slight man wearing a black cap, pulled down tightly, and dressed in a black tracksuit. Then, about 30 minutes later, at around 11 o'clock at night, another sighting occurred. This time, a pair of sisters passing through the same park encountered a suspicious man. The man reportedly called out to them, saying, "Students! Students!" The sisters, feeling uneasy about a stranger calling them, quickly left the area. The description of this man's attire closely matched that given by previous witnesses. A young man wearing a black hat. What connection does he have to this incident? Subsequently, a truly crucial witness emerged. Between 11:30 at night and midnight, this being the time after Jo had sent her last message, a man passing near a drainage area unexpectedly heard a woman scream. Realizing that something was amiss, he instinctively turned his head towards the source of the sound. There, he saw a medium-sized car with heavily tinted windows parked. At that opportune moment, he also heard the car door slam shut, and at that very moment, a leg, presumed to be that of a woman, came into view. The car did not immediately drive away, but remained in place, according to the witness. The male witness stated that although he found all of this to be somewhat strange, he left the scene since nothing else occurred afterward. If this testimony is accurate, it is highly likely that this was indeed the vehicle used in the crime. There was also another witness account. It was from a taxi driver who happened to pass by the area. Unfortunately, the black box footage from that time had been erased. However, Fortunately, this driver remembered in detail the car he had coincidentally passed. He specifically recalled that there was a silver butterfly-shaped sticker attached to the trunk of this older model sedan. He also remembered that the car's license plate contained the numbers 6 and 7. Typically, who would put a butterfly sticker on their car? Probably someone in their 20s to early 30s, right? The police immediately gathered information nationwide on mid-size cars with butterfly-shaped stickers. Among them, they also conducted DNA tests on the car owners. This was a massive search operation, yet no matches were found. As you have heard, there are quite a variety of witness accounts coming in. But before going further, there were those who witnessed the last known appearance of Joe, the survivor. It was a couple in their 50s who were out for a walk in the sports park. They reported that their attention was drawn to a young woman wearing her cap backward and crying as she passed by. After comparing with CCTV footage, it was confirmed that the woman the couple saw was indeed Joe. At that time, she was crying loudly while talking on the phone with someone. The police swiftly examined the phone call records. The last person Joe spoke with was her friend, referred to as Mr. B, but ultimately, he had no involvement in the case. The call took place at approximately 11:30 in the evening. When questioned, the friend revealed that Joe had long harbored feelings for a man who recently announced his engagement. Distraught by this news, Joe called her friend around 11:30 and was heard crying before abruptly ending the call. This detail, however, was unrelated to the crime itself, yet it helped establish a timeline for the incident. The estimated time of death could be narrowed down to a window between 11:35 in the evening and midnight. The body was discovered at 4:30 in the morning. By that time, livor mortis had already formed on her chest. Livor mortis refers to a type of discoloration that appears on a body after death. When a person dies and collapses, blood settles due to gravity, creating this phenomenon. This evidence further aided in estimating the time of death. Let us delve into the reconstructed narrative of the crime as pieced together by the police. It was 11 o'clock in the evening on October 15th. Joe, having finished her part-time job, was walking along the path of the sports park. Around 11:30, she made a tearful phone call to her friend. This moment was witnessed by a couple in their 50s who were taking a stroll in the park. Shortly after the call ended, Joe was attacked by the perpetrator. The assailant forcibly subdued her and pushed her into a car that had been prepared in advance. A passing male happened to witness this terrifying scene. The perpetrator appears to have attempted an act of inappropriate behavior inside the vehicle. However, when she fiercely resisted, it seems likely that he ultimately strangled her to death. After Joe's death, the assailant allegedly removed her body and disposed of it in a nearby drainage ditch. He then placed her lower garments and underwear in a bag with her belongings and hurled it down a slope approximately 2.5 kilometers from the crime scene at the coast before fleeing. This scenario has been put forward, yet opinions began to diverge. The forensic pathologist's perspective, upon examining Joe's body, differed somewhat from that of the police. Observing the marks on the body, the pathologist suggested that the crime might not have occurred inside the car. This conclusion was drawn because the body exhibited numerous scratches and abrasions. It seemed that Joe had been overpowered in an area such as a grassy field covered with small stones or dirt. In the absence of a clearly identified suspect, accurately reconstructing the events of that day is crucial. This process might even unearth previously unknown witnesses or testimonies. It was not until the year 2018, 8 years after the incident, that a re-evaluation of these items was conducted. Unfortunately, no new evidence has emerged thus far. Despite numerous witness testimonies and the presence of DNA belonging to the presumed perpetrator on the victim's belongings, the true perpetrator of this crime remains unidentified, which is deeply regrettable. Nonetheless, there have been unexpected successes. during the pursuit of the perpetrator, another case's suspect was found. The police had collected DNA samples from numerous men to find the murderer. In doing so, they discovered a match with the DNA found on the body of a victim from a robbery and non-consensual intercourse case that occurred in 2003. They caught the criminal, and although this case was unrelated to Joe's, it nevertheless resolved another crime. Remarkably, the Mopo police station, while investigating Joe's case, managed to solve a total of 12 other cases. While the real perpetrator behind Joe's murder has not been found, this accomplishment is still considered a positive outcome. Experts remain hopeful that this case has a significantly higher chance of being solved compared to others. The reason is clear. There exists a critical piece of evidence, DNA. With unwavering determination, it seems just a matter of time before the culprit is apprehended. Meanwhile, criminal psychologists speculate that the perpetrator likely resides in the Mopo area and is intimately familiar with the geography of the sports park. It is highly probable that he lay in wait, targeting a victim, and acted impulsively when Joe appeared. Although he might not have a criminal record, it is assumed that he harbors a distorted desire to dominate women and possesses a strong propensity for violence. Joe, a university student full of dreams and a diligent nursing student, is remembered fondly. Her older sister, A, continues to live with the burden of guilt for not searching for her sister sooner that night. A constant regret haunts her. If only she had gone out a bit earlier, perhaps she could have saved her sister. This is a weight that will oppress her heart for the rest of her life. It is imperative that the true perpetrator is caught, to honor the grief of the bereaved family who lost a cherished member, and to commemorate the spirit of the innocent victim who was unjustly killed. Even the smallest tip from the public could play a crucial role in the investigation. Don't miss the second story, and let's discuss the first one too. Share in the comments what surprised or resonated with you the most. On August 25th, 2002, a woman whose name remains undisclosed went on a short vacation to spend time with friends in a forest park located in Changhua County, Taiwan. She arrived first, parked her car near a trail, and went to find a place to relieve herself. As soon as she crossed a ditch on the trail, she was overcome by a smell similar to acetone. She began to search the area and discovered a raised rectangular mound under an acacia tree, with an unnatural amount of vegetation and partially visible plastic bags. Curiosity got the better of her, and she pushed aside the weeds to reveal a black plastic bag shaped like a human body. She poked the bag slightly and was horrified when a charred human leg suddenly protruded. The police arrived shortly after. Together with pathologists and forensic experts, the investigation began. They searched the area for more evidence, but unfortunately, apart from a few more bags and branches covering the body, nothing else was found. 4 days later, on August 29th, the forensic expert who examined the body provided an autopsy report. The body belonged to a woman, approximately 40 years old, 165 centimeters tall. A significant amount of fabric was found on her body, indicating she was clothed at the time of the burning. Death had occurred around 20 days prior, between August 1st and 5. Despite the severe burns, signs of strangulation were found on her neck, as well as a cut on the inner thigh. The most intriguing detail was that a caustic substance had been poured on her face and fingers to prevent identification. In the victim's stomach, the forensic expert found traces of a sedative and a neuroleptic. The combination of these substances caused the woman to lose consciousness before she was set on fire. On one of her fingers, there was a plastic ring with a Buddhist symbol, and the word Stark engraved in English. It was also determined that the victim had undergone breast augmentation surgery during her lifetime. Investigators noted that her implant weighed 240 grams, which was illegal and exceeded the Taiwanese legal limit of 180-220 grams. They also found other gold jewelry, such as earrings. Since all the jewelry was intact, robbery was immediately ruled out as a motive, as was suicide. Given that the woman wore Buddhist rings and her implant size exceeded legal limits, officers concluded she was not Taiwanese. She was more likely from Southeast Asia, possibly the Philippines, Malaysia, or Vietnam. This led to the logical assumption that she might have been either a migrant worker or a foreign bride murdered by her Taiwanese husband. Based on these conclusions, the police checked thousands of registered foreign brides and workers in Changhua County, but none matched the description of the body. Officers expanded their search to China, Japan, and Korea, but this also yielded no results. Only one woman from Taichung, fitting the description, had gone missing in early August. Larissa printed several flyers appealing to the public regarding this clue. The investigation continued for 6 months, but no one came forward with useful information. The case remained unsolved and the body unidentified. Eventually, a detective from Taichung named Chang Wentong contacted the Changhua police. He had recently heard news of the discovery of the woman's remains and believed he knew the victim personally. She was 40-year-old Chen Qinli. On August 4th, Wentong received a call from Qinli's daughter, Su Shuting, reporting that her mother had disappeared. Not much is known about Chen Qinli's childhood, parents, or place of birth. The information available pertains mostly to her life with her 40-year-old husband, Su Qingyang. To avoid confusion, the missing woman will be referred to as Qinli, and her husband as Qingyang. Qinli and Qingyang met in Taichung. Both worked at a metal manufacturing plant and had relocated there. Their friendship quickly developed into a romantic relationship, and they soon married. They had 3 children, Su Shuting, Su Weizhen, and Su Wei. After their children were born, the couple decided to quit their jobs and open their own hardware processing factory in the Taiping area. Qinli proved to be more hardworking than her husband, who hardly contributed to the factory's operations and mostly stayed home with the children, while Qinli managed the factory successfully. The factory soon brought in enough profit for the family to live comfortably for a long time. During this period, Detective Chang Wentong from Taichung met Chen Qinli through her husband, Su Qingyang, who was a police informant and often served as a witness in various theft cases at the factory. After the family started earning a good income from the factory, Su Qingyang became even lazier. He began spending the profits on various desires, such as gambling, drinking, and even mistresses. These mistresses and their relatives often appeared at the factory, causing numerous problems, sometimes requiring police intervention. Chang Wentong, who had become almost a family friend, frequently helped resolve these conflicts. This blatant disrespect and numerous affairs led to the children suffering from ridicule and contempt. In 1993, Chen Qinli couldn't take it anymore and filed for divorce. However, for the sake of the children, the couple continued living together. A few years later, they remarried, but the same issues resurfaced. They divorced and remarried again in 1997. Essentially, nothing changed. Su Qingyang never stopped cheating on Chen Qinli. Each year, it became harder for her to forgive his infidelities, especially in 1999, when another affair of Su Qingyang's came to light. That summer, Chen Qinli hired a woman named Lai Huiqi as an accountant. Huiqi was in a desperate situation since her husband had recently been imprisoned for theft, and he was the sole breadwinner for their small family. Chen Qinli, feeling compassion, provided her with a job at the factory. However, instead of being grateful, Huiqi became Su Qingyang's next mistress. When Chen Qinli found out, she immediately fired Huiqi. The affair, however, was stronger than the previous ones and lasted more than just a night. After Huiqi's dismissal, Su Qingyang rushed to defend her and even had the audacity to threaten Chen Qinli. He forced all the factory workers to refer to Huiqi as the boss's wife and threatened Chen Qinli, saying he would marry his mistress and reinstate her in her position, claiming he had every right to do so as a co-owner of the factory. It didn't matter that Chen Qinli did all the work while he only spent the money. It's easy to imagine the difficult position Chen Qinli was in. Desperately wanting to prevent the situation from worsening, she asked Chang Wentong to help mediate the conflict. Disliking her husband, Su Qingyang, Wentong agreed to act as a mediator between the spouses. He managed to convince Su Qingyang to take only a small portion of the assets and to pay child support for their 3 children, over whom he did not want custody. However, the conflict did not end there. In late 2001, Su Qingyang secretly moved in with Lai Huiqi, married her, and opened a new factory, transferring 2 truckloads of equipment from Chen Qinli's factory, essentially stealing it. Enraged, Qinli found her ex-husband's new home and confronted the couple, which resulted in her being beaten and humiliated. After opening the new factory, Su Qingyang put all his efforts into poaching employees and clients from Qinli. Unable to reach an agreement with the couple and with her reputation damaged, Qinli turned to Wentong for help. Unfortunately, the police considered this incident a civil dispute, and since Wentong was a detective in the criminal division, he lacked the jurisdiction to assist her. Left to fend for herself, Qinli decided to retrieve the stolen equipment from her ex-husband. She managed to take back only part of it before Su Qingyang and Lai Huiqi hired security guards to patrol the factory. They also called the police and reported the theft. This time, the police intervened and warned Qinli to stop harassing the couple. Sensing that Qinli was vulnerable and easy to intimidate, Su Qingyang decided to retaliate further by stopping child support payments. The last time Qinli was seen alive was on August 2, 2002, when she was playing cards with a neighbor. Su Qingyang was also seen near her that day. He approached her, whispered something in her ear, and left. What he said to Qinli remains unknown, but she continued playing cards for another hour before leaving, never to be seen again. Qinli's daughter, Su Shuting, told Wentong that her mother wasn't home when she returned that day, and it was quiet on the 3rd and 4th, leading her to suspect that her father might have lured and killed Qinli. Wentong shared this suspicion and helped Shuting file a police report, but no action was taken by the authorities. When the unidentified victim's body was found, Wentong raised the issue again, but the police dismissed the possibility that the body could be Qinli's. Although her height and weight matched, officers were convinced that the victim was a Southeast Asian foreigner. Furthermore, no one could confirm whether Qinli had undergone breast augmentation surgery. Attempts to locate underground clinics were unsuccessful, and it was well known that she had never left Taiwan. Receiving no assistance from his superiors and colleagues, Chang Wentong decided to conduct the investigation independently. He tried to recruit potential factory employees to monitor activities and report back to him. However, only a few agreed, and one of the first recruits quit within a month, uncomfortable with constant surveillance. Soon, Su Qingyang suspected Wentong's plan and stopped hiring new employees. Fearing suspicion, he changed the factory's location multiple times between 2003 and 2008 to avoid Wentong. In the summer of 2006, a local lawyer named Zhang Tingchen was hiking with friends when he felt an eerie chill and anxiety, as if someone had died there. For several weeks, Tingchen sought answers and wondered if someone had indeed died at that spot. Later, while meeting with the head of the criminal investigation department near the city of Tanaka, he learned about an unsolved case involving an unidentified victim. Tingchen, without hesitation, decided to make a documentary about the case. He boldly claimed he would reveal the victim's identity live on air, using methods akin to a seance. However, this required access to the body, which was stored in a morgue freezer. During the live broadcast, he conducted the seance, but the program ended without identifying the body. Nevertheless, the show gained immense popularity among the public. Chang Wentong was one of those who watched the program when it aired. This renewed his determination to prove that the body belonged to Chen Qinli. By this time, Wentong convinced his superiors to reopen the case, and the investigation resumed. Su Qingyang remained the primary suspect. The police decided to do what Wentong had previously attempted and sent undercover informants to the factory posing as potential hires. But Su Qingyang was still cautious and did not fall for the bait. The next step was to pit Su Qingyang and Lai Huiqi against each other. In March 2009, an undercover officer, along with a team from a television and an electric company, infiltrated the factory under the pretext of filming a show about electricity theft. It turned out that stolen electricity was indeed found at the plant. Consequently, Su Qingyang was fined 700,000 Taiwanese dollars. This plan worked as Wentong had intended because the factory was already struggling. Each year was worse than the previous one, and the hefty fine became the last straw. Su Qingyang and Lai Huiqi had a severe argument, leading to their separation. A few days later, still reeling from the conflict, Huiqi approached Su Shuting, Qingyang's daughter, and said, "Do you want to know what happened to your mother? Just ask your father." Whenever Qingyang visited his daughter, she tried to get him drunk, hoping he would inadvertently reveal what he had done to Qinli. Eventually, Shuting succeeded in breaking her intoxicated father. He admitted that Qinli was dead. In his drunken ramblings, he mentioned burning the body and beating her with a stick. However, he also claimed that he did not kill her and could not stop the violence in time. Since there was no direct confession of murder and some details were revealed under the influence of alcohol, the police could not arrest him by law. In April 2009, Shuting used a clever trick, telling her father that she and her brothers knew the truth and that he should surrender to the police. She also lied, saying that if anything happened to her, her brothers would certainly go to the police and reveal everything. The ploy worked. Qingyang confessed to the murder. However, he did not hurry to the police station due to some unfinished business. Unfortunately, Shuting allowed him to complete his affairs before he voluntarily surrendered to the authorities. It escalated to the point where Huiqi, along with her 2 children from a previous marriage, Jinfang and Qinghong, approached Shuting's house, intimidating and mocking her and her mother. Huiqi's children openly stated that Qinli was dead and that her former husband had killed her. They repeatedly mentioned that their mother, Huiqi, was also involved in the murder. Upon hearing this, Shuting did not leave her house. She called the police, but for some reason, they did not arrive. She then called Wentong, who arrived within minutes and arrested the entire family. Upon arriving at the police station, Wentong informed the police that 2 factory workers, Zhang Yuchen, age 24, and Su Chuangkai, age 23, should also be arrested. It turned out that both were involved in Qinli's murder. Officers decided to postpone interrogating Qingyang and Huiqi and instead focused on the factory workers and Huiqi's children. Huiqi's 2 sons naturally said nothing. However, Yuchen and Chuangkai confessed to assisting in Qinli's murder, for which Qingyang and Huiqi were responsible, and that the body found on the trail belonged to the missing Qinli. Later, Qingyang and Huiqi, unable to withstand police pressure, confessed to everything. Qingyang claimed that Huiqi was the mastermind behind the murder. The idea came up when Qinli started stalking and causing problems for the couple. They had not expected her to fight desperately for her life until the end. On August 2, 2002, Huiqi rented a minibus and involved 2 factory workers in the plan. She also lied to them, claiming that while they worked for Qinli, she frequently underpaid them and prevented her husband from paying them more. This information was meant to anger the men, and it did. Their motivation was to get back at Qinli, not to kill her. That same day, Su Qingyang went to the neighbor's house where Qinli was playing cards. There, He convinced his ex-wife to meet him at the Yijiang Bridge in Taiping. The woman agreed, and upon arrival, Qingyang offered her some wine to make the conversation easier. The wine was laced with a sedative, and as soon as Qinli drank it, she lost consciousness. Half the job was done. Following the plan, Qingyang called Huiqi, who was waiting at home. She arrived at the bridge half an hour later. They loaded Qinli into the van and went to the factory to get the tools they would later use to kill her. They then drove to a rural mountainous area and ordered their workers, Chuan Kai and Yu Chen, to smother Qinli with a towel. The towel was too short, making it impossible to strangle her. Moreover, Qinli regained consciousness and started to resist. The workers couldn't subdue her alone, so Qingyang and Huiqi got out of the van, grabbed sticks, and began beating Qinli. They thought this would kill her, but it didn't. She was still alive. Qingyang then became even more aggressive in his blows. Qinli cried and writhed in pain, but the torment didn't end. Qingyang, not knowing how to kill her, thought of pouring gasoline on her and setting her on fire. For a full 2 minutes, Qinli was alive, feeling everything as she burned, until she finally fell silent. Once the body burned and was extinguished before any villagers could notice the fire, Qingyang and Huiqi poured a caustic solution on her face, chest, and fingers. Then, all four placed her body in a plastic bag and disposed of it in the forest park. The next day, the murderers also burned the clothes and murder weapon before going home and continuing with their lives as if nothing had happened. On May 14, 2009, authorities exhumed the body, and the coroner conducted a second autopsy to verify if the injuries matched the confessions. The forensic expert noticed blunt force trauma wounds on her remains that the previous coroner had missed. The front of the victim's body was severely burned, and there were traces of smoke in her airways, confirming the murderer's account that Qinli had been burned alive. All details matched. Finally, DNA was extracted from the body and compared with the DNA of Qinli's 3 children. The results matched, and the body was conclusively identified as Chen Qinli. The trial took place in the Supreme Court of Taiwan. The court and the prosecutor did not believe any of the accused when they tried to shift the blame onto others. For example, Yu Chen and Chuan Kai claimed they were unaware the plan involved murder and were deceived into participating, but the court rejected this claim. Huiqi also asserted that she did not know they planned to kill Qinli and only beat her with sticks under Qingyang's coercion. Qingyang repeatedly blamed Huiqi for being the mastermind behind the cruelty. Qingyang claimed that Qinli wanted to remarry him, leading to frequent quarrels with Huiqi over this issue. However, no one believed them. On November 18, 2010, all 4 were found guilty. Workers Yu Chen and Chuan Kai received 8 years in prison. Huiqi was sentenced to 18 years in prison, while Qingyang received the maximum penalty, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, as the court found he conceived the plan to kill his ex-wife and incited others to partake in the savage cruelty. This case became a sensation in Taiwan and caused public outrage. People were furious at the shoddy work of the Changhua police, who failed to both solve the case and identify the victim. Additionally, the forensic expert overlooked obvious wounds and smoke in the lungs of the victim. Taichung police were also heavily criticized for taking so long to acknowledge that the body belonged to Qinli, essentially ignoring Chang Wentong's arguments. Many credit the case's resolution solely to Chang Wentong. Many believe that if it weren't for him, Chen Qinli would still be unidentified, and her murder would have remained unsolved.